So welcome everybody to today's presentation for Tu B'Av. Today is a very special day, Tu B'Av, and our sages say that Lo hayu yamim tovim leYisrael ke Tu B'Av b'Yom HaKippurim. There has never been more joyous days in the calendar of the Jewish people like Tu B'Av, which commences tonight. Tu B'Av is the 15th day of the month of Av, and Yom Kippur. The fact that it says there's no greater festivals than the 15th of Av and Yom Kippur indicates that Yom Kippur is a close second. So in other words, Tu B'Av, the 15th of Av, is even greater than Yom Kippur. So there's a few questions we need to ask. Since when is Yom Kippur such a joyous and happy day that it says there was no more joyous days than the 15th of Av and Yom Kippur? And what is the connection between the two that it groups them together? If Tu B'Av, if the 15th of Av is a very joyous occasion, I would say maybe Purim. I would equate it maybe with Sukkot, days of rejoicing. Why the day of Yom Kippur? There's many things that happened on the 15th of Av, but I'm going to only concentrate on one of them, and that is that on the 15th of Av, and it is what makes the connection between the 15th of Av and Yom Kippur. On the 15th of Av, there was permission granted for the Jewish people to intermarry within the tribes. Prior to the division of the land of Israel, because the land was divided to the 12 tribes of Israel, people couldn't marry outside of their tribes because the land was not yet divided. It wasn't yet, people did not know what their allocation was. Once the land was allocated, then people know this part belongs to such and cannot be transferred from one tribe to another tribe. And so from that moment onwards, Tu B'Av was like a day of encouraging of marriage, of marriage between the Jewish people. And that is exactly the theme of Yom Kippur. Yom Kippur, we know that King Solomon calls the day of giving of the Torah Yom Hatunato, Yom Simchat Libo. It is God's day of marriage with the Jewish people, a day of great joy for God. But what happened after the Ten Commandments and the Torah was given? The Jewish people sinned with the golden calf, and the tablets were broken. The tablets being, so to speak, the marriage took place between God, being the groom, and the Jewish people being the bride, and the wedding document was the Torah, the Ten Commandments. Once that was broken, then the marriage, so to speak, was severed until such time that God gave an opportunity for the Jewish people to repent. And because of their repentance, and because they initiated the giving of the Torah was no longer a gift granted by God to the Jewish people, but rather one that they earned it. So they received the Ten Commandments, and therefore the marriage between God and His nation was restored. What type of marriage? The supernal marriage. Marriage takes place in two levels: supernal marriage and physical marriage down below. And that is the connection between Yom Kippur that reenacted, so to speak, augmented and strengthened and reunited God with the Jewish people, the supernal marriage, the spiritual marriage. And Tu B'Av on this day, where this was the day that has been set aside as a celebration for the physical marriage between the tribes of the Jewish people. So the theme is the same, and that is bringing people together. The theme is the concept of marriage. There's a supernal marriage, a spiritual marriage, its spiritual source, and then there is the physical marriage as well. And that is why I'm going to name the shul Marriage a Spiritual Union. If we understand the spiritual dimension and the spiritual union of marriage, then it enables us to better relate to what the concept of marriage is and how to have a much more harmonious marriage. It is interesting to note, according to this, then, that the physical marriage then is even greater than the supernal marriage. Why? Because the sages say that there is no greater days of happiness and joy like the day of the 15th of Av and Yom Kippur. Yom Kippur, being the symbol of the supernal, the spiritual marriage, takes second place to the physical marriage and relationship between husband and wife, which is really central, a central theme to the Jewish people, and we will soon see why. Now we know that when there is a bit of a division or a doubt on something, when you remove the doubt, it strengthens. For example, in Jewish law, there is something called that if there was a doubt rendered over a document, let's say in Jewish law, if there's a document and signed by two people, and someone says, no, it's a forgery. So then they take it to Beit Din, and Beit Din then analyzes it and sees indeed, and interviews the witnesses, and sees whether it's a forgery or not. If Beit Din, what's called Mekayem, prove its authenticity, reaffirm its authenticity, nobody can ever doubt it again. Once the Beit Din puts a sign on it, in other words, what caused its endurance is the fact that there was a doubt, the fact that there was a division, the fact that there was a problem here. So too, what happened with the first marriage, so to speak, that took place with God, the first document that took place with God and the Jewish people, the first tablets that were broken. But after the breaking of this marriage and the fact that the Jewish people recognized their mistake and wanted to reconnect to God, it caused that the second tablets endured and existed forever. So too with the relationship. Man and woman, Adam and Hava, are really one. They're really one souls. And then they were divided. Upon when God created Adam and Eve, they were divided. And this division, in fact, causes, according to Kabbalah, causes a greater desire for that union. Because they started off as one, there was a division, and then that causes a greater desire to be reunited. And that is what has to be continuously kindled, not only on a spiritual level, but also on a physical level as well. And we know with physical things, sometimes when we argue, and arguing is a normal thing of life, but when you come to an honest and true realization of the purpose of the argument, of the purpose of the fight, or what caused the division, then when you come together, it causes a greater unity. And that is a fact. And that is exactly what happened with the giving of the Torah. And that is exactly what God designed when He created Adam and Eve as one, separate them in order to be able to create this longing and the desire for one another that causes it to endure much more, were it not to have this division and separation. This happened as well with the tribes, where the tribes weren't allowed to marry together, and all of a sudden when permission was granted after the division of the land, it causes a greater union. And the physical union of physical marriage is crucial in the eyes of God, as we will soon see. There's a book called Getting the Love You Want, written by Dr. Harley Hendricks. And there he writes that people generally marry to further their own psychological or emotional growth. They don't marry to take care of the needs of someone else. In dealing with this concept of what marriage is, so Rabbi Dr. Twersky, which is a professor of psychiatry, he says that if this is the attitude towards marriage, that each one marries in order that the other party takes care of their needs, is really traveling in the wrong direction. And he says it's like, we just came from the airport not too long ago, and I love those walking footpaths. They're wonderful. And this walking footpath really has two sides to it. One going this way and one going that way. So Rabbi Twersky writes, it's like a person whose spouse is on one side and the other spouse on the other side. At one point they meet in the middle, but sooner or later there's a divide, there is a distance that will be created because they are traveling the wrong direction. If we travel the wrong direction, no matter how good you are communicating, no matter how much you are attracted to each other, no matter how much compatible you think you may be, if you're traveling in opposite directions, ultimately this will cause a distance between the marriage, between the couple, and if you want to communicate, what ends up happening? If you want to communicate, you need to shout, you need to scream, until even the screaming and the shouting won't help, because the division is so wide that you will never be able to recoup that relationship. And therefore, in my humble opinion, if we understand the spiritual source of what marriage is, or what the institution of marriage, and what relationship really is all about, then we're able to travel in the right direction. If we have shared values and we travel together in the right direction, then we're able to have a proper and solid marriage and union and relationship. So let's see how this works from a spiritual dimension. And if we are able to absorb the spiritual dimension, then each one, today's not a class about, different strategies, how to make the marriage better or not, although we can certainly brainstorm one day and get together. But today is really about understanding the spiritual root. If we understand the spiritual root and significance of who we are and who our partners are, then that makes it so much more easier. So let's start with that. We'll see how it goes. We know that the Torah starts with the letter Bet. Bereshit bara Elohim et hashamayim ve'et haaretz. In the beginning, God created heaven and earth. The commentaries ask, why did the Torah start with the letter Bet? It should start with the letter Aleph. Aleph, especially since Aleph really hints to it the name of God, as I'll show you in a second. And also Aleph being the very, very first letter. So, if anything, the whole world is a revelation of God's compassion and kindness. It should start with the letter Aleph, because over here we see the letter Aleph. Here's the letter Aleph, lifted up for the camera to see, is a composite of 3 letters. If you see over here, there's a Yud on top, there's a Vav in the middle, there's a Yud on the bottom. Can you see that? So Yud and Vav is a numerical value of 26, which is the numerical value of God's name, Yud and Hey and Vav and Hey. So if there any letter that the Torah should have commenced with, should have commenced with the letter Aleph, that represents the divine name, revelation, God's light. Why did it start with the letter Bet? And there are different commentaries. One commentary says that because it's the beginning of the letter of bracha, blessing, and so on and so forth. I would like to posit and to say that the letter Bet, when you write out the letter Bet, is spelled Bet. How do you spell the letter Bet? In phonetics, if you want to be able to write it out. Bet is just a symbol of the letter, but how do you write it out? Bet, Yud, Taf, correct? Bet, Yud, Taf spells the word in Hebrew, Bait, house, a home. A home. A marriage is called a home. A woman, it says, is called a home. Because she built, Isha Banta Bait. A woman builds the home. The marriage is referred to as a home. On the spiritual level, Sfirat HaMalchut, according to Kabbalah, is called Bait. The attribute of the feminine aspect of this world is called Bait, a home. And therefore, the first thing that God wants to say is the very first revelation, that before we even begin a whole word, this is the very first letter, hints to us already and tells us the greatest bracha, the greatest blessing on the whole purpose of my whole creation is that there should be a Bait. The Beit HaMikdash is also called Bait, by the way, the house of God. That there should be a home, that there should be a Bait, and that Bait is, the anchor of that Bait is a relationship between a husband and wife. And that is the purpose of the whole creation. And if we understand that to be the whole purpose of creation, then the whole institution of marriage is not like an ordinary human being that looks like a marriage that someone else will take care of my needs, and then I will be able to take care of someone else's needs, and someone else will take care of my needs, and that's the compromise that somehow brings us together. Because if we somehow at one stage feel that the other person does not take care of my needs, we're in trouble, and we're traveling in the wrong direction. We have to always travel in the right direction. And if we recognize that God created the world for the purposes of a bait, of a home, of a marriage, that's already an unbelievable, wonderful starting point, where it gives us empowers us and gives us incredible encouragement of what marriage is all about and how important marriage is about, and that is a goal and a purpose in the whole reason why we're created and why the souls came down to this world in the first place, empowers me and gives me reason and purpose to make sure that the marriage is whole, and make sure that I will do everything possible that there is shalom bayit, that there is peace and harmony in the home. So that's first and foremost. The sages tell us that ish ve'isha zachu, if a man and a husband or a wife, or a man or a woman, zachu, if they merit to have shlom bayit, to have peace, Shekhinah sheruya benehem. The divine presence resides in their home. Could there be any greater gift than the divine presence residing in their home? How do you ensure that? Shlom bayit, when there's harmony and peace in the home. When you understand and recognize what the home is all about. And why is that? So because each one recognizes that there is a shared value here. There's a shared purpose. And where there is shared purpose, it unites us. For example, let me give you an example. When the Jewish people sinned, so there was division. When they sinned with the golden calf, there was division. It caused division. What did God do? A student of mine in Israel just reminded me that many years ago I gave a darush on this very topic, so I credit it to him because I couldn't remember it, but he reminded me. He said that I said, and it really is correct, that when the Jewish people sinned and there was division amongst the people, what did God do? He gave them a project of building the Mishkan, building a house for God. That project united the people, empowered the people. All of a sudden they came together in unison. This donated, this did, anybody had a talent. Everybody brought their strengths, their powers together in order to build this house of God. Where there is a shared project, there's unity. So too in regards to marriage. If we view marriage as a shared project of building a home, building a house, and thus causing the divine presence to reside in this world, that shared project together brings us together, and does great things to be able to make the marriage is wholesome. In the words of the Holy Arizal, a man is called Ish. A woman is called Isha. Okay? Now you will see that there are some common letters to Ish and Isha, and that is Aleph and Shin. Aleph and Shin spells Esh. Esh is a very powerful energy, fire. Esh is fire, it's a very powerful energy, but it could destroy. If we're not harnessing that energy properly and traveling together, then that energy could destroy one another. Like we're traveling in different directions. Says the Holy Arizal, there are two letters that are infused in that Ish and Isha dynamics. And if you have a look, Ish has the letter Yud of God's name, and Isha has the letter Hey of God's name. You see over here the Hey? So here we have already the first two letters of God's name. When a man and a woman marry, usually a legal writ in Hebrew, in biblical language is called ketav. But in regards to a marriage, it's not called ketav, it's not called a writ. It's actually called, you all guessed it, what's it called? Tubah. Tubah is spelled with ketav, with an extra two letters, vav and hey. So Ish and Isha, we have the first two letters of God's name, Yud and Hey. Ktubah, we have the last two letters of God's name, Vav and Hey. So Yud and Hey and Vav and Hey. So when a man and a woman marry and understand the concept of marriage to be something holy and unique and special and rooted in supernal marriage, then it causes a divine presence to reside. It is a project that brings us together. Now, I want to share with you an interesting Gemara. The Gemara in Masechet Yevamot, page 63, reads as follows. Amar Rabbi Elazar. Rabbi Elazar says, Kol Adam she'en lo isha, any man that does not marry, that does not have a wife, eno Adam. You cannot call him a man, cannot refer to him as a man. He's not a man. In other words, he's missing. He's not complete. Not only is not complete, cannot even be called Adam. We will soon see why. It's very powerful. Why? Why isn't he called Adam? Listen to this. Shne'emar, as it says, when God created Adam and Eve, what does it says? Zachar unekeva bera'am. He created them male and female as one unit. Vayikra et shemam Adam, and he called them Adam. In other words, when God created Adam and Eve as one composite, one soul, two halves of one soul, he called them together Adam. And therefore, if we are not united in marriage and in harmony, then we are missing that appellation or that name or that description, Adam. That name, Adam, is very powerful, as we're going to get to in a minute. If you do not marry or do not are not committed to what the concept of marriage is, you are missing that concept of Adam that man calls us. What exactly does that mean, Adam? Now, the Arizal says a very interesting thing. In our prayers, just going to get the Siddur over here. In our prayers, one of the prayers in the Amidah, we ask God for redemption. And when we pray for redemption, we say as follows. Here it is. God, look upon our distress, fight our battles, maher lega'olenu ge'ula, and hastily bring our redemption. Lema'an shemecha, for your name's sake. For your name's sake. The Holy Arizal says that when we say for your name's sake and redemption, when we ask God for redemption, and redemption, remember, is not only just a global thing, redemption for the whole world. There's also our own redemption. We also have issues and things that we need. We need redemption on a private level, not only on a global level. The Holy Arizal says that when we meditate on this blessing, and when we think about your name, we meditate upon a particular spelling of God's name, which is as follows. Now, this is God's name. This is the Tetragrammaton name. It's spelled Yud and Hey and Vav and Hey. But each letter, remember, each letter is spelled out in order to spell out each name. So each letter is written in its full. In Hebrew, it's called Milui. And that represents a more expanded revelation. For example, if I just give you one or two letters, you can't do much with it. But the more letters I give you, the more words you're able to fashion with them. And so too as well. This is the power and the essence. This name is the power and the essence of all creation. But then from that has to develop and expand into physicality. And that is how that happens when there are more letters added to the mix, meaning to say that godliness is expanded more to things that are more tangible, like letters. And that name is called the name that is written out like this. Yud is spelled Yud Vav Dalet. Hey is Hey Aleph. Vav is spelled Vav Aleph Vav. And Hey Aleph, Hey is Hey Aleph. It could be spelled in different ways, but this is the Kabbalists teach us is one of the most important names of God, and this is a name that rectifies the world. It's called Shem Ma, which is in Olam HaTikun, that comes to rectify the world. This name is a very powerful name. This very name, ladies and gentlemen, is a very numerical value of Adam, man. Man. And when God called man and Eve Adam, what he's telling us is that embedded the very DNA and identity of every single one of us is this holy name of God. It has the power to rectify all worlds. And therefore, we meditate on this name because this name is able to bring redemption to the world. If we are able to learn the lesson of this name, and what it really, really means and the depth of this name, then indeed we're able to bring redemption on a personal level, to our marriages, but also to the whole world, as we will soon see. Because the name, the word Geula, redemption, is the exact same numerical value as 45, is exact same numerical value as Adam. So if we understand what Adam is, and Adam is not just man, it's Adam and Eve together, And if we understand what that name of God represents, then we're able to bring redemption, we're able to bring harmony to the world. Let's see. Now, remember we said that the intrinsic name of God is the Yud and the Hey and the Vav and the Hey. Don't be frightened by these Kabbalistic concepts, because we will explain them all in a minute. So remember we said that this is the essence of God's name. So this name that we said before, spelt out, has it the main name, the main letter, and then the peripheral letters. You see how the Yud and the Hey and the Vav and the Hey spelt out. What are the main letters of God's name? Just the first letter of each, the Yud and the Hey and the Vav and the Hey. That is the name, the main letters of God's name. If I were to look at this, Kabbalistically speaking, I would say that there's a feminine dimension to it and a male dimension to it. The male dimension is the, so to speak, the mashpia, the giver, and the feminine is that which expands that which is received. So if I were to look at this and say, what would be the male dimension and what will be the female dimension? I would say, well, the male dimension is the very first letters, the very first revelation of God's name. The female dimension would be the next letters, the Vav and the Daled, etc., etc., etc. Correct? And that would be these letters down below. Take out the numerical, the name of God, Yud and Hey and Vav and Hey. You get the peripheral letters, Vav Daled, Aleph. You get the letters Vav Daled, Aleph, Aleph Vav, Aleph. Right? You see in the pink how it's highlighted? In Kabbalistic terminology, that refers to the relationship between male and female, light and vessels, body and soul. Everything has a body and soul. Everything has light and vessels. The secret to redemption is to harmonize the two together. That there should be harmony between husband and wife, that there should be harmony between body and soul, that there should be harmony between light and vessels. So in this example, the Kabbalists would teach us that the light would be represented in the first letter of God's name, the main letter, and the vessel or the body or the wife would be exemplified through the other letters that expand, like a woman expands and creates a child from a seed. And what would be the numerical value then of these letters, the letters that expand God's name and bring it outwards? 19. Now that is a very, very special number, because that is a numerical value of Hava. So when it says, remember the numerical value of this name is 45, which is Adam. Remember? This name of God that refers to the tikkun, the rectification of all worlds, the unity and harmony between body and soul, Adam and Eve, vessel and light, this world and the spiritual world, supernal marriage and physical marriage. It's all tied in together. It's all in this name. In this name is the numerical value of this name is Adam, man. And the numerical value of Adam is Geulah, redemption. And contained within this name is the main name of God, which refers to the male component, and the feminine, which refers to the other letters that spells Hava. So we see that when God, it says when God created Adam and Hava, V'kar'am Adam, he called them man. Hava is included in the Adam, the male component and the feminine component of the name of God. The light, the vessel, the body and the soul. And that is how you get redemption, ladies and gentlemen, whether it is individual redemption or whether it is spiritual redemption. If there's harmony between husband and wife, redemption. If there's harmony between body and soul, redemption. The biggest problem that we have is no harmony between body and soul. The body wants Bondi Beach and the soul wants Safari Synagogue. But when we synthesize and harmonize them and bring them together and able to create a harmony between them, that they work together and they have a shared common values and they are traveling together, then the husband and wife, there's peace, there's redemption. Then the body and soul, there's peace, there's redemption. Then the spiritual world and physical world, there's peace, there's redemption, there's equilibrium. There's no tension, there's no friction. And that is the secret of this name. And that is why Rabbi Elazar says, if a person doesn't have a wife, he's not even called Adam. He cannot be called Adam. Why? Because Adam is a composite of man and woman, of body and soul, of light and vessel, of Adam and Hava. And that's why he says you cannot even be called Adam. Now, if we understand that we are not Adam, if we don't make a marriage work, if we don't invest in marriage and travel in the same direction, then we're not Adam. Then our whole focus towards marriage is totally different. It's an ideal, it's a goal, it's a purpose of creation. And I am not complete without my spouse. And I cannot make it without my spouse. Why? Because the whole world is built upon these two concepts: spirit, light, vessel, giving, receiving. And there must always be the concept of giving and receiving constantly in a relationship. The Kabbalists tell us that man and woman are compared to wisdom and understanding, the relationship that exists between wisdom and understanding. Wisdom on its own is without understanding. You cannot explain it. Understanding on its own, without wisdom, doesn't have that spark of knowledge that merges together. The Kabbalists say that these two attributes are always in a state of intimacy and union. And if there is no continual intimacy and union between the two, then there cannot be an offspring, there cannot be the concept of thought, there cannot be the concept of emotions, and there cannot be the concept of action. Just like a husband and wife, if they are not in a state of intimacy and union, then there cannot be offspring, cannot be children. The Kabbalists tell us that union and intimacy on those supernal level is constant and continual. If not, that the relationship is not proper. It's deficient. And so too with a husband and wife. There must continuously be a union or an intimacy between the husband and wife. And it doesn't refer to just the physical intimacy. It refers to a harmony, a continual unity between the two. And that is the objective of what the supernal marriage is. That must be translated into the physical marriage. And for this reason, it says that the 15th of Av, there's no greater festival than the 15th of Av, than the 15th of Av and Yom Kippur. Yom Kippur is second. Why? Because the whole purpose of the supernal marriage is that there should be a physical marriage. And physical marriage is hard. And just like the supernal marriage, there must be a unity between wisdom and understanding, which is the spiritual source of man and woman, of the masculine and the feminine, and the spiritual source of what will eventually be light and vessel, recipient and giver, and that the unity is constant. So too, the unity down below must be constant. And if that happens, then you get redemption. If that happens, then you get Geula. And that's harder. It's harder because the supernal intimacy occurs all the time, says the Kabbalist. It's there, it's constant. But it's there as a reminder and an impetus for us to be able to achieve and replicate what's in heaven down below. And that's not easy. But if we're able to achieve that, we're able to achieve Geula, redemption, which is, as I mentioned to you before, the spelling of the name of God in this particular way is the same numerical value as man, is the same numerically as redemption, and man is a composite of male and female, Adam and Hava, the concept of giver and receiver, and that there must be the concept of giving and receiving continuously. Continuously. Because if there is no concept of giving and receiving, then life is devoid of purpose and meaning. There must be a constant giving and receiving. A person must be willing to receive, but also must be willing to give. And that happens on both from the aspect of the wife and both in the aspect of the husband. It has to be a continual state. And if there is a continual state, that's what creates the harmony. I just want to go further and say a very interesting thing. In Halakha, it says that there's precedence. There's if you don't have enough money, let's say for certain things for Shabbat, first thing is you have to make sure that you have candles for Shabbat. Why? The Halakha says because it encourages shlom bayit, peace in the house, peace in the home. Now I'm not going to get into the commentaries what they say why that causes peace in the house. Obviously, the candles create an ambience, and you're able to sit down and enjoy your meal, etc. That's from a very basic physical level, but it goes much deeper than that as well, and I'm going to get to that as well. Why is it that candles, of all things, create a harmony to such a degree that shlom bayit, peace in the house, to such a degree that if you don't have money for anything else, you should spend the money on the candles of Shabbat. More important than anything else. If you didn't have money for Hanukkah candles that comes around once a year, and you only had enough money for Shabbat candles, guess what comes first? Shabbat candles. Now you would think that, oh, well, what about Hanukkah? We say Shehiyanu on Hanukkah, because it only comes around once a year. We don't say Shehiyanu on Nerot Shabbat, on the candles Shabbat, because it comes every week. You would perhaps give precedence to the candles of Hanukkah because it represents a miracle. It comes about once a year. No, Shabbat candles first. Why? Shlom bayit, peace in the house. Why? How? Let's see. The prophet says, Ner, listen to this, very powerful. Ner Hashem nishmat Adam. The candle of God is the soul of man. Candle of God is the soul of man. Now we know Shabbat how many minimum candles we light? Two. One keneged shamor, and one keneged zachor. Right? One shamor is passive, represents the vessel, the feminine, and one represents the active, the light, the active, the energy, etc. Now, the Holy Kabbalist tells us that, and there are two. And what does the candle? What do they generate? So they generate light, or correct? The Kabbalist tells us, the Holy Arizal tells us that or anything that is hesed, that is kindness, that is love, that is giving, is called or. The source of it all is God light, divine light. It's called or. And the Holy Arizal writes, and he tells us that or the letter Aleph represents the soul. Remember we said before, the essence of the soul, as is always united with God, up above. Remember we said that the candle of God, Ner Hashem, Nishmat Adam. The soul of man is a candle of God. Correct? So our soul is like light. The Holy Arizal tells us that the letter Aleph of or, of light, that is generated by the candle, is always united with God. And we will soon see in a second, because the letter Aleph itself spells out the numerical value of God's name. Remember, Aleph is spelled, the letter Aleph is Yud on top, Vav, and Yud on the bottom, Yud, Vav, Vav. So numerics is 10 plus 6 equals, 10, I beg your pardon, Yud, Vav, Yud. I beg your pardon, Yud, Vav, Yud is 26. 10 plus 6 equals 26. Yud, Vav, Yud. We have two or. And remember the letter Aleph, says Arizal, that name in or, in light, which represents the divine energy of the divine name of Yud and Hey and Vav and Hey, the divine light, is always united with God. So what do we have left? We have the letter Resh and Vav that is down below. That is the more physical dimension of the spark of God, the soul of God, the soul of man, the candle of God, right? Okay, so there are two candles that we light on Shabbat, right? And therefore we're generating two lights. One represents the feminine, one represents the male, correct? Which leaves us with the letter Vav and Resh. Remember the letter Yud is always united with God. the letter Vav and Resh, and Vav and Resh, because 2 candles equals a numerical value of 412, which spells Bayit, marriage, home. So when you light the Shabbat candles and you're lighting 2 candles, why is it Shlom Bayit? Because it spells the letter Bayit. The two light that is generated by a husband and wife having the equal project of making a Shabbat, of making a home, of creating the Shabbat, because it doesn't happen on its own, doesn't happen on the wife on its own, it doesn't happen on the husband on its own. That's why there's a custom that my wife reminds me every Friday that the husband should prepare the candles. The wife lights it, but the husband prepares it. Why? Because it's a team effort. There's 2 lights here. There is the candle that represents the male aspect, the candle that represents the female aspect. And together, the Vav and the Resh of the feminine and the Vav and the Resh of the male spells 412, which is Bayit, which is marriage, which brings us to get back to the original thing that we said. Why did the Torah begin with the letter Bet? Because it spells Bayit, it spells home, and nothing is greater than creating a Jewish home with everything that what a Jewish home is about, the spiritual dimension of a Jewish home, planting it down below. Now, what else is very unique is that we light 2 candles. Remember we said we light 2 candles? So the 2 candles are Ner. What's the numerical value of Ner? I forgot to write it out, I'm sorry. Maybe I did. Nun and Resh. Correct? Nun and Resh, right? Nun and Resh. What's the numerical value? Nun and Resh? 250. 1 candle, 1 Ner is 250. Keneged Zachor. 1 candle, Keneged Shamor, is 250. 250 plus 250 equals? How much? 500. How many limbs, creative limbs, does a man have? 248. How many limbs, creative limbs, does a woman have? 252. 252 plus 248 equals? 500. So when the husband and wife come together, they create this energy, this 500 of those 2 candles of Shabbat. And that's why the 2 candles of Shabbat, according to the Holy Arizal, creates the harmony between husband and wife. And what do they represent? They represent the divine light that God introduced in the world, the divine light of Hesed and of love and of kindness. Having said all of that, God says when He created Adam and Eve, He said, "Na'aseh Adam b'tzalmenu kedmutenu." I'm going to finish off with this. Let us make man in our likeness and in our image. In which way are we likened to God? In which way? God is unlimited and we are limited. In which way am I similar to God? There are many explanations. Some explain that it is our soul. Some explain our intellect, ability to choose. No creature in the world, not even angels, can choose between doing whatever good or bad. Only man and God. I would like to say that the only thing that we resemble God to is love. Because there's one thing, only one thing about us that is unlimited, and that is love. When you're a child, you love your parents, sometimes your siblings, depends. And when you get married, all of a sudden you still have room to love your parents, to love your siblings, and to love your spouse. Anything diminished in your heart? No, because love is unlimited. Then you have children, all of a sudden there's more love in your heart, and you're able to love your children, and then you're able to love their spouses, and then you're able to love their children, and children's children infinitely, infinitively. That's not the right word. Ad infinitum, until infinity. There's no end. There's only one thing that we can be compared to God in an unlimited way, and that is love. Love is ahava in Hebrew. Ahava is a numerical value of 13, which is same numerical value as ehad, as one. Where there is harmony, then there is love, and then there is unity. And when there is love, we are then compared to Hashem. We are in the image of Hashem, and then we are recipient of the divine name, everything that it represents, everything that we spoke about, and then we bring down the divine light and the harmony that is exemplified through the Shabbat candles. Shlom Bayit, peace and harmony. We create Bayit, we create a home. we create a unity. We create oneness. This is the purpose of creation. And this, if we remember this, that if there's harmony between a husband and wife, body and soul, physical and spiritual, it's a numerical value of God's name and Ge'ulah. My wife is probably standing there because she's hinting that I should end. Yeah. No, but this is the end. This is what brings it all together. How do we get redemption? How do we have harmony? When we understand that there must be a harmony and a unity between Adam and Hava, between body and soul, between vessel and spirit, between giving and receiving. If there is always a concept of giving and receiving, we are traveling in a relationship, we are traveling the same path. There is harmony, there is godliness, there's the divine presence residing in our home. There is Ge'ulah, which is the numerical value of that God's name that we mentioned before. Redemption on an individual level and on a communal level.
Thank you.
So if there's any questions, I'm happy to take.